Hello, everyone. It's me, Kirsten, and this is the It's Giving Mystical podcast. And this is your podcast for the week ahead, the week of January 31st, January, the longest month, the year that lives on its own. And just a reminder that we're really, really encouraged. You're going to hear me say this probably every week for the rest of the year because I'm going to forget it. You're going to forget it. Encouraged to tend to our own, as I said last week, sacred flame, but particularly your own sense of nourishment and checking in with like your level of burnout. There's just so much happening. The pacing of this year is going to be quick. Things will not remain unresolved. So if things have any kind of kink in them or any kind of contraction in them or in any way are not meant to be with you in this next part of your journey, the discomfort around them will become quite real. And there's something important about just noticing that, observing that, being with that, but more importantly, checking back in with yourself. Like, what do you need? If we're really grounding into our larger power, if we're really grounding into the sense of what we're here to do and really truly living in alignment with like our song, then it's going to require that we take care of ourselves. That is the journey that I hear activists talking about it now, but I think there's something important that anyone who's in any kind of healing space, any kind of service space, any kind of artistic space, you realize that since 2020, you've had to recalibrate what you can participate in. You've had to recalibrate who you participate with. You had to recalibrate where you source from. It's just such an important thing. And it can sound kind of abstract until you can feel the distinction in your body of this is me offering my gift, my service, my art, my light from a place of fullness, and this is me offering it from a place of depletion. It's a very clear sensational difference, a somatic difference in your body. And so just reminding you that that prep work you've been doing for at least last year, but probably for the past 3 or 4 years, that that prep work is you're being kind of called to the table on that. And this is a daily practice. This is not a sprint. It's not an achievement. It's a daily practice of showing up for yourself and checking in with yourself. And like I said last week, kind of connecting with your sacred flame and just noticing, not with harsh judgment, but with compassion and kindness and gentleness and generosity for yourself. Where am I separate from that? Where is my life in alignment with that? And it's not a straight line. So again, just you be kind to yourself. I should be kind to myself. We should be kind to ourselves as we begin to just kind of have the sense of, okay, this is this sacred fire in me that needs to be expressed. That is its own gift to the world. Here are the ways that I am diminishing it. Here are the ways that I am nurturing it. Here's how my life is in alignment to it. Here's how my life reflects an old version of who I was and what I cared about and what I wanted to offer. So all of that's happening. Net net, pace yourself. Net net, be patient with yourself. And net net, come back to what you need. Like really come back to the basic nourishment of your day, of your body, and honoring your needs before you not honor the needs of others, which is tricky business. And we could have a whole conversation on that. But I think you can get the sense of where you're out of alignment there. And if you've been listening to me, if we've been spending time together, if you're spending time in your own kind of practice and your own art, then you know that there's a clear distinction in our day-to-day lives when we're moving from a place of fullness versus when we're moving from a place of depletion. Like you can feel the thinness, the thickness of that, the difference between the two. Okay, so the card I have for us this week is the Six of Cups. The Six of Cups is a really interesting card because it appears so lovely. Like it appears like this marketplace, and there's a lot of golden light, and there's two figures, and it appears like one is giving the other one a cup full of flowers. And I remember when I was little, I mean, I've told you guys this, but like some of my first memories are paging through my mom's deck. I loved this card. Like I saw this card and I was like, oh, this is cozy because it is meant to indicate like the sweetness of childhood. It's also meant to indicate nostalgia. So when the Six of Cups comes up, we're talking about harmony, we're talking about beauty around the emotional body. The key concepts around this card are nostalgia, childhood, sweetness, community, family. And so that's something to just to note about this card. But I will say to you that this card has a bit of a it almost has like a sinister quality to it. It just sounds kind of extreme. It's one of those cards, like there are some certain cards that you look at and you're like, "Oh, that's a dangerous card. That's a sinister card. Like let's take our good friend the devil." This card, there's a sweetness to it, and lurking behind the sweetness is this sense of unreality. My daughter took this class last semester called the Uncanny Valley, and it was just about the idea of how the uncanny shows up in, media and in the world. And she said it's like the way she was describing it to me, the valley is actually the graph, and the graph is moving through quadrants. And the reason something's uncanny is because it's both familiar. I forget what she said, something about how it's like very familiar, and yet there's a distance to it. There's an offness about it. And so the uncanny are the things that should be really sweet, should be really lovely and make you feel comfort, but there's something just a little bit off of them. You can think like a doll in a horror movie. Okay, I don't know where we're going with this. But this sense of like I should feel like that's a cozy, safe thing, but there's just something about it that's a little uncanny, a little off color. That is really very present with the Six of Cups and very present with the way I pulled it today. Nostalgia, our childhoods, even the idea of childhood in general, we can paint it with this picture that makes it something kind of unreal. We can remember things, and nostalgia doesn't have to be just childhood, right? It's any memory. It can be when you're in a relationship and that relationship isn't, feeling really good, but you're still very hooked into the nostalgia of what it was like, of what it could have been, right? Childhood, the same. There's this sense of, have you ever had that experience like in therapy? I so remember so clearly. The first time I went to therapy, I was working in Chicago, and I had this boss that would just, like, throw me under the bus in these huge meetings, and I started having anxiety attacks, and I remember I was like, "I need to talk to someone." I, like, literally couldn't breathe at work, and I went to talk to a therapist, and she was like, "Tell me about your life," and I told her, like, my story, like, my childhood story, and I was like, "That's it, pretty basic," and she was like, "Is it?" I remember that's the first time I looked at my childhood and I was like, "Oh, maybe that wasn't the sweet romance I thought it was." So there's something imagine I'm not alone in that experience where someone holds a mirror to something that is a kind of just part of your story, part of, what you thought you were, what you thought the world was, what you thought your upbringing was, and then someone holds a mirror to it and you're like, "Ooh, that's not necessarily the way I saw it the whole time. Interesting to look at it from this different perspective." That energy is here with this card. So when it comes up for us in a week, we want to just kind of really notice where we're over romancing things, where we're very attached to the truth of a thing and we're not giving it space. Like we're not kind of walking all the way around it and just kind of investigating, that is a beautiful thing. And nothing is perfectly beautiful. Like there's an important truth to the fact that we need contrast. We need this sense of something needs to be beautiful, but it also needs to be maybe impermanent or, like think of a flower, right? The flower could just blow your mind. And yet there's nothing you can do really to make the flower last. We can preserve it and dry it and do all kinds of cool things to it, paint it, but you can't really keep the thing. That's the truth you want to keep front and center in a Six of Cups week. This is beautiful. And then I also have an attachment to it being beautiful, or this was important, or this was sweet, or this was comforting. And now I also have an attachment to it being comforting. I would imagine there's a lot to be said in the world of addiction around that, right? Like this thing brought me comfort, it brought me ease, it helped me survive something. And then I keep going back to it, even when it stops being helpful, even when it stops being the fix, the cure, because I have an attachment to the time it brought me comfort. I have an attachment to the idea that that's possible again. So, Six of Cups it can be a little bit of like a heart achy card, maybe not heartbreaking, but it can kind of help you touch into the impermanence of things. It can help you notice where the story is just a little bit too sweet. And it can be there's a dynamic in this card, right? So there's two characters, and what's interesting about the characters is that their scale is always a little bit off. So it feels like who's the child, who's the adult? It feels like Something's just, again, like a little bit uncanny, a little bit off about the image. Why is he giving her the flowers? Like, what's the dynamic here? So that's the other kind of important aspect of this card is this is a relational card. This is a dynamic card. So this can be when you confront someone and their version of the truth, their version of the beauty, their story is just very different than yours. And there can be this kind of conflict, but also just dissonance of how can someone see something so differently? Like, so imagine your siblings, for example, or someone that you were raised with, and you're like, "This is the way it happened, remember?" And they're like, "That's not the way it happened." And then you're like, "What do you mean? Like, we just were in the same place. How did we see it so differently?" And that might come up in a Six of Cups week. You might have revelations where someone says to you, "Remember this thing?" And you're like, "That's not the way I remembered it." So memory is a huge part of this. And then the relational aspect, sorry, let me just touch back on that quickly. The relational aspect is noticing the gifts people are giving you, noticing if there are attachments. So, again, attachments is also a big theme here, strings, expectations attached to those gifts. So, just kind of noticing these exchange dynamics and what you're asked to collude with, what you're asked to agree to, what you're asked to, I don't kinda like nod your head at in the exchange of information, in the exchange of gifts, in the exchange of things. So, on the one hand, the nostalgia can be lovely. It can be like going back to a childhood place or a place you were young and being like, "Oh, this. Like, I really feel the part of me that lived in this time and what that meant to me and what, those people meant to me or those places meant to me, that story meant to me, that particular flavor of beauty, what it meant to me." And then so that can be its own kind of lovely experience. But there is something about just noticing when Yeah, noticing when there like, what's the truth of that? And then what's the attachment to that? And then what's the investment in that attachment? I think that's kind of the key part. It's like we are attached to our stories, we are attached, but we wanna be aware of how thick that attachment is, how invested we are in that attachment, right? There are certain things from your childhood that I can be like, "Oh, the jacket you loved, it was purple, not blue." And you'd be like, "Oh, that's so crazy, it was purple." But if I tell you some story about who your father was, all of a sudden that become your investment in the attachment to the way he was is much is a much more tender thing, a much more, like, substantial thing. And so there's something about kind of tracking that. Like this is the story, these are the beauties that I've loved in my life. That feels like it's not just a childhood thing. Like these are the beautiful moments I've loved. This is my attachment to that beauty and what it meant to me. And then here's my investment in the attachment. Like here's the amount of energy I'm feeding into the attachment. It's very like basic and boring of me to say this, but we're really only here now. Like, we live in a quantum field, and there's definitely an argument to be made that we're in all the moments at the same time, but truly, I'm only sitting here right now. Wherever you are only here with my voice doing the thing you're doing right now, and this moment will very quickly and almost magically fade into the next one, right? The delineation, the distinction from moment to moment is literally as subtle as our breath, as subtle as our inhale, as subtle as the rotation of the earth, from our perspective. And so there's something like very, very simple and very seamless about this constant rotation of moments. And yet, the truth is that we're constantly only in that moment. It's neither good nor bad that we are nostalgic, that we are attached to things. It's neither good nor bad that we are invested in the stories of our child and the stories of the moments that were beautiful for us. This is why, the Buddhists talk of attachment. Attachment is a real thing and it does cause us, I mean, you could say pain and there's something to be suffering. Like lots of people say that, right? And there's truth to that. But I would say from a more objective standpoint, it's just energy. So, like, you have to really imagine yourself as an energy body and your energy is moving in all of the places that you are attached. There's momentum and connection between you and your close loved ones. There's momentum and connection between you and your space. There's momentum and connection between your past self and your future self, and all of your past selves and all of your future selves. And so, what we're trying to do is minimize the amount of energy that's out in the world that's like cruising out there. And we're trying to bring ourselves back to ourselves. And so that's where this conversation around nostalgia or childhood becomes just a curious, interesting one. Like, why does it have to be that way? And the last thing I'll offer you is just notice the things that like you're attached to the story. Like, this is the way it has to be. This is the way work has to be. This is the way a relationship has to be. This is the way money has to be. This is the way my environment has to be. I just implore you to be a little more open-handed and a little more curious this week about just hearing yourself kind of narrate and be like, this is the, oh, does it have to be that way? That's interesting. What else might be possible? And it's why Byron Katie's work is so powerful because in beautiful ways and in horrible ways, we get so attached to what we believe the truth is. And the truth is an energetic, but not an event, like not a thing. It's just an energetic, like beauty, like love that lives in the world. And we can be attuned to the energetics of it without getting attached to the expression of it. And so whenever anything has to be true, has to be beautiful, has to be important, then just okay, it's so interesting. And what else? I hope that's helpful. I would just say to you, there's the uncanny is just here with us. And it comes back to that thing I've been talking about that I don't have the best language for, but I'll just kind of keep trying to express it. The what is being presented to you and then the way that thing feels energetically in your system and in your world. And really needing to explain yourself less and needing to honor what you feel more. That's the uncanny, right? Like in the horror movie, that's just a cute doll. It can sit here in my bedroom. But the feeling is, I don't want that doll in my bedroom. So then take the doll out of your bedroom. You don't need to explain to anyone why that doll can't live in your bedroom. Like, it's a kind of a silly example, but it's also not. Like, there's this thing and it looks like it fits. It looks like I should like it. It looks like it's beautiful. It looks like it's truth, but the energetics behind it are in dissonance that don't agree with that and strike you wrong, unsettle you. Trust what you're feeling about the world more than what you can explain about the world, especially right now, especially right now. Okay, my uncanny friends. When Hazel first told me about the uncanny valley, I would picture literally this valley in the mountains with all these weird dolls in it. But then she explained to me it's a graph. She's so smart. My child's so smart. I love you guys, and I do hope that on the upside that you get to experience the beauty of the 6 of Cups this week, which is that sense of nostalgia and connection, through time and space. And then just noticing, like, can you leave it there? Can it just feel good that it happened versus is there some attachment to the story you're spinning out of it happening? I hope that makes sense. All right, my mystical friends, sending you so much love across the ethers and may we open our hearts to the moments of beauty as gently as possible and as fully as possible, and then make peace with the impermanence of it all at the same time. Yeah, let's do that this week. Okay, bye.